The folder on Jay Leno's desk had Mariah Carey's original recording contract from 1990 sitting on top. October 1997, NBC Studios. And that's when Mariah knew this wasn't just another interview. They'd gone into her archives, into sealed legal documents, into things that should have been locked away forever. Jay Leno sat across from her with that predator smile, fingers resting on that impossibly thick folder like it was a loaded gun. And Mariah's first thought was, how did they get access to sealed contracts? The handshake had been too firm, the greeting too polished. And now this, a folder with Columbia Records 1990 visible on the tab, sitting right there on the desk where millions of viewers could see it, where cameras could catch it, where Mariah would spend the entire interview staring at her past package for primetime destruction. What was about to happen? Her manager was backstage, and even from here, Mariah could see the woman look terrified, pale, shaking, like she'd tried to stop this and failed. The crew was acting strange too. No eye contact, nervous movements. The hairstylist who'd done her hair 30 minutes ago had whispered, "I'm so sorry," as she left the chair, and at the time Mariah thought she meant the curl pattern, but now she understood. They all knew what was coming. Everyone except the studio audience, clapping and cheering like this was just another celebrity interview, not knowing they were about to witness either a public execution or something else entirely. Jay started the show smooth, professional. "Welcome back to The Tonight Show. Tonight we have Mariah Carey, one of the most controversial figures in music. Not successful. Not legendary, controversial." The word hung there like an accusation. The audience's applause faded, and Jay didn't wait. He went straight for it. "Mariah, we need to talk about your past. Your real past, not the version you've carefully crafted in interviews, but what actually happened behind the scenes." He reached for the folder, opened it, and Mariah saw pages and pages of contracts, financial documents, court filings, things that shouldn't exist anymore, things that had been sealed by legal agreements, buried, forgotten. How did they get these? Jay pulled out the first document. 1991, your second album. The label wanted creative control. You fought them. The internal memos tell a very different story than the one you've told publicly. He started reading. Details about studio battles, arguments with executives, names Mariah hadn't heard in decades. And here's what made it devastating. Some of it was true. Twisted, stripped of context, missing the full story, but true enough that she couldn't just deny it. That was the genius of it. Mix truth with lies until nobody can tell the difference. The audience was quiet now, uncomfortable. This wasn't entertainment. This was invasive, personal. But Jay kept going. Document after document. A lawsuit from an ex-boyfriend claiming emotional distress. Medical records from when she had exhaustion in 1995. Financial records showing massive spending during her difficult periods. Each piece carefully selected to paint a picture of someone unstable, someone difficult, someone whose success was somehow undeserved. And that's when Mariah noticed something. Jay wasn't just reading randomly. There was an order to this, a building narrative. Each revelation designed to set up the next one, climbing towards something bigger. What was the endgame here? Was he building towards something even worse? The man in the navy suit in the front row was taking notes. No expression, just writing everything down. Was he recording every word for someone else? A woman next to him kept checking her papers, then looking at Mariah, then checking her papers again. Were they coordinating this in real time? Was this being sent somewhere else? To people waiting to use this information? Jay pulled out a photograph. Old, slightly faded, but clear enough. Young Mariah at what looked like an industry party. This was taken in 1989. Do you remember this night? Mariah looked at it. She did remember, sort of. That whole year was a blur of showcases and meetings and promises. But why was this photograph important? What was Jay building toward? Why show this specific moment? This party, Jay continued, was hosted by Victor Castellano. Does that name mean anything to you? And there it was. The name that made everything else make sense. The name that connected dots Mariah hadn't even known needed connecting. But how deep did the connection go? What else did Jay know? Victor Castellano, a music executive who'd tried to sign Mariah in 1989, back when she was a backup singer, who'd offered her a deal that would have given Castellano complete control over her career, who'd threatened her when Mariah chose Tommy Mottola and Columbia instead, who'd supposedly retired in 1991, or so everyone thought. Victor Castellano, Jay said, disappeared from the industry 6 years ago, officially retired. But there are questions. Questions about his business practices during the 90s, questions about artists he controlled, and questions about what happened to people who refused to work with him. Was Jay implying what it sounded like he was implying? That Mariah had something to do with Castellano's disappearance? That was insane. That was beyond insane. But looking at Jay's face, at the careful way he was presenting this, Mariah realized this wasn't about truth. This was about creating doubt, about planting seeds, about making millions of people wonder. Was that the real goal? Not to prove anything, but just to make people question? The audience was riveted now. This had gone from uncomfortable to shocking. The media had to be recording every word. Entertainment Tonight probably already had their cameras ready, and Mariah was sitting there live on national television, being accused of something Jay never quite said directly. But the implication was clear. How many other people were watching this and believing it? Mariah felt that familiar anxiety rising, the same feeling that had sent her to the hospital years ago. But getting emotional was exactly what they wanted. They wanted her to break down, to prove their narrative about instability, to give them the clip they could replay forever. So she pushed it down, stayed composed, waited, because something about this whole thing felt off. Not just wrong, but strategically off. Like Jay was playing a game without knowing someone had changed the rules. The questions kept coming, but now they were different, softer, about her relationship with her children, about her various record labels, about business decisions she'd made, deals she'd signed, people she'd trusted, and that's when Mariah started to see the real pattern. This wasn't about her past. Not really. This was about her present, about her recent separation from Tommy Mottola, about her independence, about the fact that she'd started her own label, controlled her own masters for new material, answered to nobody. But how long had they been planning this? Months, years. Jay shifted tactics, pulled out more financial documents. Your label lost money in its first year, nearly bankrupted you according to these reports, yet you refused several partnership offers, several deals that would have saved you. Why? Because those partnerships came with strings, Mariah thought, with creative control clauses, with people who wanted to own her. But she didn't say that, not yet. She was starting to understand the full scope of what was happening here. This wasn't just an interview. It was a pressure tactic. Public humiliation to force her hand. Make her look unstable, difficult, desperate. Then swoop in with a rescue offer. Classic industry warfare. But who had designed this strategy? Was Jay even smart enough to orchestrate all this? Jay kept pressing. You've had very public disputes with other artists. Behavior that some have called erratic. Relationships that ended badly. Former colleagues have made statements about your demands, your control issues. Do you think you have a problem with authority? There it was. The psychological angle. Paint her as difficult, as someone who can't work with others. Someone who needs management, needs handlers, needs someone to save her from herself. But was this really about psychology, or was it just another pressure point? The audience was uncomfortable again, but differently now. Some looked sympathetic to Mariah. Others looked concerned. Jay was skilled at this. He'd done his homework. Every question designed to chip away, to create doubt, to make people wonder if maybe Mariah really was the problem. And here's the thing, some of it was fair. She had fought with people. She had ended professional relationships abruptly. Her personal life had been messy at times. But context mattered. Why she'd fought, why she'd walked away, who she'd been fighting against. And Jay was deliberately leaving out all of that context, presenting a version of events that served his narrative. Was this how they operated with everyone? Build a case using partial truths? Jay pulled out another document. 4 months ago, you were approached about selling your new label. A very generous offer, tens of millions of dollars. You refused. Can you tell us why? There it was. The real question. The one all of this had been building toward. And suddenly the folder, the documents, the accusations, all of it made sense. This was leverage. This was pressure. This was someone trying to destroy her publicly because they couldn't control her privately. Mariah looked at Jay, really looked at him, saw the sweat on his upper lip, the way his hands trembled slightly when he wasn't holding the papers, the nervous glances toward the control room. Jay wasn't the architect here. He was just the weapon. But who was pulling the trigger? Could it be someone in that control room? Or watching from somewhere else? The studio audience was completely silent now. Nobody moving. Nobody breathing. Just watching. Waiting. Was everyone feeling this tension? Did they sense something bigger was happening? And Mariah made a decision. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a performance smile. A genuine smile of understanding. You know what's interesting, Jay? Her voice was calm. Clear. That famous voice that had sold 200 million records. You've done impressive research into my past. Really impressive. Must have taken months. But there's one thing you forgot to research. She let the pause hang there. Let Jay start to sweat more. Let the audience lean forward. You forgot to research what happens when someone underestimates me. The shift was immediate. The control room producer started making frantic signals. The cameras were still rolling. This was live. No editing. See, here's the thing about that folder, Mariah continued. It's impressive, really. Someone went deep. Sealed contracts, medical records, private documents. That's not easy to get. That's expensive. That takes serious connections. So I started asking myself, who has that kind of money? That kind of access? That kind of motivation? Jay tried to interrupt. I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. Mariah cut him off smoothly. I'm telling you, someone wanted me on this show, specifically, tonight. They wanted this ambush. They wanted these documents read on air, and when my team tried to postpone last week saying I had scheduling conflicts, your network threatened legal action. You ever threatened to sue over a rescheduled interview, Jay? The audience was starting to understand. You could feel the energy shifting. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was something bigger. My team did some research too, Mariah said. Found out some interesting things about your show. About new consultants you brought on recently. About where your funding comes from now. About who's really making decisions. She was building now piece by piece, not giving away too much. Just enough to make people wonder. That name you mentioned. Victor Castellano. He didn't retire in 1991. He went underground. SEC investigation was closing in. Insider trading. Market manipulation. He disappeared. Changed his identity. Kept working in the industry through proxy companies. You know who he works for now, Jay? The studio went dead silent. Even the crew had stopped moving. He works for the same people who tried to buy my label 4 months ago. The same people who've been consolidating independent operations across the industry. The same people who hired you as a consultant right before you invited me on this show. Jay's face went white. I can't discuss. You don't have to discuss it, Mariah said. The documents speak for themselves. My attorneys have copies. So do several journalists. So does the SEC, actually. Because it turns out financial fraud and identity changes are kind of their specialty. The audience erupted. Some people standing, some just shocked. The man in the navy suit was already leaving. The woman with the papers looked panicked, and Jay sat there, realizing his ambush had just been turned against him. But Mariah wasn't done. Because this was the moment. This was where everything had to come together. Where the real truth had to drop. But here's what you really didn't know, Mariah said, and her voice got quieter, more intense. Victor Castellano didn't just try to sign me in 1989. He had my mother on retainer. My mother, who'd been struggling financially, who wanted the best for me. Castellano found her, paid her, had her try to convince me to sign with him instead of Columbia. And when I found out, when I chose my own path, Castellano tried to destroy me back then too. Planted stories about my voice. Said I used studio tricks. Made sure certain radio programmers wouldn't play my music. That's why my early career was harder than it should have been. That's why I had to fight so hard for every achievement. Because I said no to him once and he spent years making me pay for it. The studio was absolutely silent now. This was the real story. The deeper layer. The personal connection that made everything else make sense. So when they came back 4 months ago, when they offered me millions to sell my label, to sign over my new masters, to basically hand them control over everything I'd built independently, I didn't just say no because of business. I said no because I knew what they really wanted. They wanted to finish what Castellano started in 1989. They wanted to own me, control me, make sure I could never be truly independent. She looked directly at the camera now, speaking to millions. And this whole thing tonight? This ambush with the documents and the allegations and the implications? This was their response. If I won't sell, they'll destroy me publicly. Make people doubt me. Make me toxic so nobody wants to work with me. Classic Castellano playbook, except I've been dealing with this for 8 years. And I'm still here. The applause started, then grew, then became deafening. People on their feet. Even some crew members clapping. And Jay sat there destroyed, knowing his career had just ended live on television. Mariah stood up, looked at Jay one more time. You were just doing your job. I understand. But you should have asked yourself why they needed you to do it. What they were really afraid of. Because people don't try this hard to destroy someone unless that person has power they can't control. She walked off the stage. Didn't hurry. Just walked away like she'd already won. Backstage was chaos. Her manager grabbed her, eyes wild. How did you know about Castellano? About your mother? We didn't have that information. I've always known, Mariah said quietly. I just never told anyone. Some things you keep private, but when they threatened everything I built, when they tried to use my past against me, I decided it was time to expose them instead. They left the building through the back. Her phone was already blowing up. Whitney Houston. Girl, that was amazing. Patti LaBelle. Baby, that was incredible. Messages from artists she'd never met. Journalists requesting interviews. Lawyers wanting to help. But also 3 calls from unknown numbers. She answered the third one. Miss Carey. A voice she didn't recognize. Female, older, tired. My name is Sandra Martinez. I worked for Victor Castellano for 6 years. What you said tonight about your mother, about the industry sabotage, it's all true. I have documents, emails, recordings, everything, and I want to give them to you. Because what they did to you, they did to dozens of others, and it's time it stopped. Why now? Mariah asked. Why help me now? Could this be another trap? Was someone listening to this call? Because my son is a singer. He's 17. He asked me last week why you're considered difficult when you're just talented, and I couldn't tell him the truth. That you have every right to protect yourself. That we tried to break you, and when we couldn't, we tried to erase you. Tonight, watching you expose it all, I realized I have a choice. The call ended. Mariah looked at her manager. This is going to get much bigger. Are we ready? Are you? Her manager asked. Had her manager known this would spiral this far? What else hadn't she been told? Mariah thought about her children, about every young artist trying to make it without compromising, about everyone who'd ever been told they had to give up control to succeed. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Over the next few weeks, the story exploded. Sandra Martinez released her documents. Thousands of pages, emails dating back 8 years showing coordinated campaigns against dozens of artists, spreadsheets tracking who'd been neutralized and who was still in play, meeting notes discussing acquisition targets like they were discussing stocks, not human beings making art. But the documents raised more questions than they answered. Who else was involved? How deep did this go? Other former employees came forward. A woman from Castellano's PR firm described how they'd plant negative stories, pay tabloids for hit pieces, coordinate campaigns across multiple media outlets. She had recordings of meetings where they'd laughed about destroying careers. But her testimony revealed something else. The PR firm had a parent company nobody had investigated yet. What did that company do? A junior executive came forward next. He'd been in quarterly meetings reviewing their portfolio, which labels they owned, which artists they controlled. Mariah's name had been on that threat list for years, marked high-priority acquisition. He brought financial records, money trails from shell companies in the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts in Switzerland, and one name that appeared on multiple transfers. Could this go higher than anyone thought? The SEC opened an investigation. But it wasn't just about Castellano anymore. It was about the whole system. Securities fraud, racketeering, market manipulation. The kind of charges that could bring down an entire corporate structure. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Senators suddenly very interested in monopolistic practices in the entertainment industry. Jay Leno's show was canceled within 72 hours. The network issued a statement about violated journalistic standards and failure to verify sources. Translation: they knew they'd been used as a weapon and were trying to distance themselves before the lawsuit started. 4 major executives resigned. Quiet departures. No press releases. Just suddenly gone. Golden parachutes deployed. NDAs signed. Lawyers already circling. Castellano, using his new identity as Victor Morales, was arrested trying to leave the country. Private yacht to the Bahamas. Bags full of computer disks and documents. The disks contained everything. Every manipulation, every destroyed career, every artist they'd crushed. It was all there. Evidence that would keep prosecutors busy for years. And the media conglomerate, behind it all, faced a massive investigation into antitrust violations. Artists started coming forward with their own stories. Similar tactics, similar threats, similar choices between selling out or being destroyed. A pop singer from Los Angeles posted a video, 15 minutes long, describing how they'd offered her $3 million for her publishing. And when she said no, she couldn't get radio play anywhere. Major stations dropped her. Within 6 months, bankrupt. Within a year, done with music. She'd thought it was her fault. Now she understood. It had all been coordinated. An R&B artist from Atlanta had recordings, phone calls where an executive threatened him. "Sign with us or we'll bury you." He released them to the press. They spread everywhere. More artists started sharing. The independent or dead movement spread. Stories from dozens, then hundreds of artists. The pattern was undeniable. This was systematic. A machine designed to extract value from creative people, and if they wouldn't submit, to destroy them. But these weren't just stories of victimization. They were stories of survival. Artists who'd been crushed and rebuilt. And now, seeing Mariah expose the machinery, they felt permission to speak. But here's what most people didn't know. What never made it into the news reports. Mariah had known about the SEC investigation for months. Her refusal to sell wasn't just about independence. It was about keeping the company engaged, making them desperate enough to do something stupid, something public, something that would give prosecutors what they needed. The interview was the trap. Jay was the weapon. But Mariah was the one who'd said it. Her manager had been the anonymous source who told NBC about Mariah wanting to postpone, knowing the network would push back aggressively, knowing it would create the exact situation they needed. The folder with the 1990 contract. Mariah's team had leaked that detail to Castellanos' people, knowing they couldn't resist using it, knowing it would make their invasion of her privacy undeniable on camera. Every piece had been carefully placed. Every move calculated. The ambush was real, but Mariah had been ready for it. More than ready. She'd been counting on it. 3 months later, the settlement payments started. Millions paid out to artists who'd been targeted. New regulations proposed to prevent this kind of industry manipulation. And slowly, carefully, the system started to change. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Mariah kept making music. But now her songs had new layers, references to what had happened, to what she'd learned, to what she'd survived. Fans who'd followed the story heard those references and understood. Newer fans discovered them and went looking for context, and the legend grew. There was one thing that never got explained, though. One detail that Mariah kept to herself. The photograph Jay had shown. The party in 1989 with Victor Castellano. In the background of that photo, barely visible, was another person. Someone Mariah recognized, but whose face was too blurry for anyone else to identify. Someone who'd been there that night and had witnessed the first time Mariah said no to Castellano. Someone who'd been watching this whole thing play out for 8 years. Mariah never said who it was, never confirmed or denied the various theories. That was layer 5, the core truth, the mystery that would never be fully solved. Because some secrets are more powerful when they stay secret. Some questions are more important than their answers. Years later in interviews, people would ask her about that night, about the Jay Leno ambush, about how she'd turned the tables so completely. And Mariah would smile that same knowing smile and say, "I grew up singing in New York clubs where people tried to control me from day one. You learn early that when someone comes at you, you better know why. You better know what they want. And you better know how to take it away from them. Everything else is just noise." The interview became a case study, a moment, a reminder. That truth, when spoken clearly and fearlessly, when backed by preparation and courage, can defeat even the most elaborate conspiracy. That one person, armed with facts and unwilling to back down, can change everything. That October night in 1997, Leno thought he was destroying Mariah Carey. What he didn't know was that he was giving her a platform, and Mariah took it. Because that's what she'd been doing her whole career. Taking the worst moments and turning them into exactly what she needed them to be. Lessons. For everyone watching. For everyone fighting their own battles. For everyone who'd ever been told to compromise or fail. The answer was always no. And if they tried to destroy you for it, you destroyed them right back. With truth. With preparation. If you're smart enough, ready enough, if you refuse to be broken, you can turn their weapon into yours. And everything changes. Who do you think was in that photograph? Drop your theories in the comments below, and if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.